Good day, everyone. Welcome to our special broadcast live from the DA Federal Congress here at Gallagher Estate in Midrand, Johannesburg. My name is Conita Hunter. I'm the assistant editor for politics and opinions here at News24, and I'm joined by Junior Khumalo, my colleague at the politics desk, as well as Jason Felix. Thank you very much for joining me. The two of you have been covering this Congress, day one of the DA Federal Congress, since early this morning. I must say that the 2024 elections really is the mood here at this Congress. You can feel that the DA is preparing itself. It's here to reignite itself, to inject fresh energy as it contends that very important election some 3 decades after South Africa got democracy. Now, Junior, before we started this conversation, you had an interesting conversation with DA outgoing leader, John Steenhuisen. He is contesting for a second term at this Congress. He was very confident.
He sounds very confident. He did say, though, that he was nervous until the very end, whether he was going to be re-elected as the leader. But he was actually very confident about the DA's chances come the elections next year. He even put his head on the line, saying that if the DA does not increase his electoral support, he is willing to step down. So that was a bold statement from him.
And that's interesting because he's not even elected for a second term, and he's already giving that condition to say, if I don't perform in probably is going to be his most critical undertaking, which is to increase the DA electoral support, then I'll leave.
Sure, I completely agree with you. I think it's a big moment for anyone who takes over as the DA leader. The DA has punted themselves as this new leader of this coalition government come 2024 elections. They're positioning themselves to say that either we take over or we're going to be a strong partner in a coalition. But what they seem to forget is that the coalitions where they've completely failed in it. Tshwane is a very good example of that. Johannesburg is probably the biggest example of it, where they were completely ousted. Ekurhuleni is another example, and these are in Gauteng, in metros in Gauteng, which are pivotal to the elections, because Gauteng is the most populous area or populous province in the country, so one would need a firm footing to go into an election to say that we will be the government next year, I'll put my head on the chopping block. The Western Cape, they're very much safe, but I think Gauteng will be their problem child, because here in Gauteng you deal with staunch ANC supporters. You're dealing with an ANC which is maybe stronger in other parts of the country, which will pull out all the stops to ensure that a coalition government never comes to fruition, whether it's a 51% or a 55%. I think the days of the ANC getting 60% is long gone. But you cannot say these things so confidently when you faced so many recent challenges, and when your support has over the years been dwindling, and they've been winning by-elections, but so has the ANC, so has the IFP.
Let's put in there, Jason, Ivan Meyer, who is the outgoing federal chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, opened the Congress earlier this morning, and he said the DA will lead a new governing coalition in the union buildings, almost admitting that this is their strategy now, that the DA wants to be the biggest of the smallest parties. They know that they cannot get an outright majority. I think that's the agreement or the understanding. But that also comes with a huge task to increase the DA support by at least 10% for them to be a formidable leader of a coalition government. At the moment, the DA support is sitting at about 22%. They obviously dipped in the 2019 elections. So 2024, it's about increasing the support base and then using that increase as leverage to be the leader of this coalition formation. Jason?
Correct. I do think that they will find it difficult to get even like a 5%, because the parties had an identity crisis in 2019. Now it's very much clear about what they want and who they are, but yet they're not resonating with the majority of voters.
It's hard to tell, though. How do we test that?
You test it in by-elections. You test it in coalitions. First of all...
So the by-elections in Cape Town, there was one where Patriotic Alliance won a ward, and that was seen as a very big indicator of what things look like for the DA, but the DA didn't even contest that board.
That's the thing. So, in my opinion, by-elections are little dipsticks that you put in and you see what you can get out of it and what you can possibly do with it. So, when you look at by-elections, the DA might not win a by-election, but their support is dropping. Or they would win a by-election, but they would scrape through with a 46%, and a party like the Good Party would get a 38%. So 5 years from or 3 years from that by-election, that smaller parties, they are the ones that then garner more support. The other thing is that the DA always, and Helen Zille is one person who does this a lot, she always says, don't vote for the smaller party. Don't vote for the smaller party, you're breaking up the vote, we need to be the strongest.
But we haven't
party.
heard this today.
But this is clearly being said in their quarters. They still believe that a vote for a smaller party is not the best option. A vote for them is the best option. But here's the problem for them. In coalitions in Tshwane and in the city of Johannesburg, they've been putting this message out there, don't vote for the smaller party, but then they go to the smaller party asking for their support. So if we're going to have a situation like that at a national level, I don't think that spells anything good for the country and for voters, and I think voters know this because this is certainly not what they want. I'm inclined to say rather the devil you know than the one that you don't.
Junior, there was a lot of anti-ANC sentiment heard here this morning in the opening speeches. I want to quote Siwe Gwarube. She's the DA chief whip, and she says, the ANC, once a liberation giant across Africa, has turned into the oppressor of its people. That's a very strong sentiment. She says, it is about time that we completely write off the ANC as a party of the past, not a party of the future. A relic of the past that is completely disinterested in the liberation of its people from the clutches of poverty. Strong words from her.
Very strong words.
The DA is taking on the ANC.
If one were to listen to this conference like in the beginning and not be aware what was happening, you'd be confused because they spoke more about the ANC than they spoke about what the DA itself is going to offer the people. So Sivu is not the only one who spoke. Ivan Meyer as well said a whole lot of critical things about the ANC. He said as the ANC decreases in numbers, the DA should increase. So most of the rhetoric here was directed towards the ANC and towards how the ground has been made fertile by the ANC's own failings for the DA to actually increase its numbers when it comes to the elections next year.
That is true.
That is definitely true. But I think also the DA, because you are speaking to your own delegates, people that are already supportive of the DA. So instead of telling them what the ANC hasn't done, tell them what the party is going to do. This is being beamed all over South Africa, across the world. Put out your own solutions. These are the Ivan Meyer spoke about.
Jordan Hill Lewis, the mayor of Cape Town, did that. I think he did it very successfully.
Yes, definitely. He's one of the few that did it successfully.
This is what I've been doing. This is how the Western Cape is going to be load shedding free. This is what we're doing to attract investment.
Yes, no, definitely. But also even the Western Cape that the DA likes using as a yardstick for its success. A lot of people point out to some of the suburbs that are outside the city that have not seen that improvement that is being enjoyed by some of the parts within the Western Cape. Also in Ekurhuleni, in Tshwane, in Joburg, the DA got into power. It failed to replicate what it has done in the Western Cape. So yes, it has pointed out at the ANC has damaged these municipalities for a long time, so it takes a while to rebuild. But in Tshwane, the DA has been in power for over 7 years, and we still haven't seen any improvement. Instead, with the Auditor General's report, the municipality has dropped in performance even far worse than when it was under the ANC. So I think the party needs to be pointing at what it would do. And what my colleague was saying, this thing of disparaging smaller parties, it works against the DA. The party said it's trying to grow its numbers so that it becomes the biggest, the leader of the coalition. But yet it consistently talks down on these smaller political parties. So who's to say they're not going to join the ANC and ensure that the ANC remains in power as well?
I want to pick up on that point. There was an interesting resolution. I'm just going to try to find it. So the this Congress is obviously going to elect going to amend the constitution. That's happening now as we speak. We'll get to that topic. They're going to elect new leaders, and then they're going to pass resolutions. I found one quite interesting. I think it was resolution 22. Where so it's on coalition agreements. It says the DA resolves that it stays true to the values of the principles of the Federal Constitution, decisions of Federal Congress and Federal Council in all coalition talks. Prioritize the needs of South Africans, but not at the expense of the values and principles of the DA, and openly participate in discussions with coalition partners, etc. The motivation I found interesting. They said the Democratic Alliance has recently been painted as an organization that is arrogant and unwilling to engage other parties in the space of coalition talks and agreements. The South African public needs to be kept informed of the basic principles of the DA observes when engaging in these talks. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that we can't enter into coalition agreements for the sake of governing, but rather let our values and principles lead us in all coalition talks going forward. I know it's a lot of vague talk, but I think this would be important in how they guide their discussions with parties next year. Jason?
No, I do agree with you. I think at times when it came to these coalition agreements, the DA was all for let's just get into government, let's just get in there, no matter who we coalesce with. And I think
Nelson Mandela Bay, there's 10.
There's 10 people, and it's probably the worst coalition agreement that you could find on the African continent. I've written about the Nelson Mandela Bay coalition, and it's so interesting because you have these smaller little parties, and these are guys with 1 seat, and I mean it's 2 seats here, 1 seat over there, and there's 10 partners that you have to manage as a coalition. And Nelson Mandela Bay has been a shining example of how not to do things. It's been up and down. Apart from even before Johannesburg became an issue, and the city of Tshwane and Ekurhuleni became an issue. So I think when it comes to coalitions for the DA, they should obviously remain true to what they are. But in that resolution where they said that they need to stay true to their own values, but they forget that in the bigger scheme of things, we should also focus on what the country needs, and that is of great importance. That will definitely attract voters, because, and I'm not saying that the DA should coalesce with a party that it fundamentally disagrees with, like a party like the EFF maybe. That would just mean disaster, not just for the DA, but for...
But it did that, right? It did that in Johannesburg before.
It did it before, and look at where they are now. Now they're completely out of the picture, and I don't think they will get into the coalition picture anytime soon. So that sets the basis for where they go with coalitions, and I think that resolution, or that motion rather, is a good thing for them. But they should also remember that in the bigger scheme of things, there's a country that needs a government, and there's a country which they say, and which they are telling the world is yearning for leadership. So step up and be that leadership.
Junior, I'm going to say that when watching the speeches this morning, I was quite impressed by the level of diversity that we've seen on stage. Young people, energetic, across the racial divide. I was quite excited to hear people like Jane Sithole speak, people like Celia Springs speak, Jordan Hill Lewis, Siviwe Gwarube. It was a good cross-section of the party. What did you make of that?
No, definitely. Even the delegates, we see it in the delegates as well. It's a very diverse gathering of about 2,000 delegates. It's the DA does value the younger generation. Like it's unlike parties like the AIDS. It's very youthful. It's a very youthful organization. They give them the platform to lead as well. The two hosts are very young as well, members of parliament that were hosting this this gathering. So you can tell that they do value the younger people, but it doesn't translate to its leadership. Like when you look at its top leadership that is going to be elected, the people that are not contested, we have your Helen Zille's in that fold, that are the older generation, the older guard that is still allowed to reign in the party. And when we're speaking about coalition governments, part of the reason why these other parties were complaining was because of Helen Zille sitting in these talks and
she's
not want.
Now.
Yes, she's uncontested, and she's still going to pose the same problem going into the 2024 national elections as well.
Jason, most of the leaders that I spoke to this morning said changing leadership a year before elections is the worst decision a party can make. And that's why there's this push for continuity. When you look into the hall behind us, I see badges of John Steenhuisen all over. It looks like you're going to have pretty much the status quo remain, right? Does that do anything for injecting new blood into the party?
I think I completely agree with you on the point of stabilizing things and not rocking the boat before a big event like the elections. I think with people like Helen Zille in there, she's been a problem for the party. The gains that the party has made, she's actually taken back
I can contest you on that, Jason. I can contest you. I think Helen Zille is the machine that runs the DA.
She's the machine that runs the DA, but her Twitter account, her comments, all of those things are just wiping out a lot of the DA's successes. And we can say about what we want to say about it, but if that was not the case, I don't think so many black leaders, strong and prominent black leaders of the party, would have left the DA.
But Mpho Phalatse came earlier to our studios to talk to us, and he says we need to stop looking at the DA through this prism of race. Yes, people left the party, but there's also at the same time strong black leaders like himself, he pointed to the chief whip of the Democratic Alliance, and he pointed to the fact that in the last 3 years, John Steenhuisen has moved away from making the leader position like this cult personality scenario, and gave power and responsibility to other people around him in parliament, etc. And so I don't think that's particularly a negative thing. Yes, on one hand, you cannot look at the DA without acknowledging the history of the racial dynamics, but at the same time, I think a lot has been done in that regard.
I think coming from the history that we come from, it's hard to divorce race and politics. Even with the ANC, it's not just the DA that it's looked at within the prism of race. Within the ANC, when the top 7 leadership was voted in, everyone was a bit bemused that all the leaders in that top 7 are black. And the media, the public, everyone pointed to that. The fact that the ANC is running away from its rainbow nation, we accommodate non-racial, we accommodate everyone policies. So within the DA, it's the same thing. As much as there is always the pointing at there are these young, strong black leaders like Siviwe, who's now the chief whip, Soli himself, but it always feels like it's about time. Whenever they challenge the top leadership, they always run the risk of being pushed out. We are yet to see what's going to happen to Mpho Phalatse if she does win or if she doesn't win. Is she going to be able to remain within the party? Are they going to be accommodating to her or not?
So we know in terms of the leadership, Jason, that so John Steenhuisen is up against Mpho Phalatse. The two of them are going to address the Congress this afternoon. What are the other positions contested? So
Helen Zille is obviously uncontested. Finance chairperson Dion George is uncontested. I think the real battle will be for the deputy federal chairperson position and the federal chairperson position, which is Ivan Meyer and another gentleman by the name of Kama. I can't get his surname now, but in the position for deputy federal chairpersons, it's Soli Malatsi, it's Refiel Benseke, it's Anton Berdal, it is Nkaba Banga, who's a very charismatic leader.
There's three positions, and there's about 6 or 7 people.
There's about 7 candidates, and there's about 3 positions available. Natasha Mazzoni is also the former chief whip in parliament. She's also up in the running for that. So there's the power is in that is in those positions. But if I can just make a quick point, Kunita, on what you said about the race thing. So Soli sat here and he spoke about the appointments that they make in Parliament, and Parliament is but one realm of where political power is. The union buildings is there are various other structures. The positions of power are all held by white males, and we need to obviously look at that. The mayor of Cape Town, the mayor of Tshwane now, the mayor of Ekurhuleni was a white person. John Steenhuisen himself, a white man, leading the party, being the face of the party. Helen Zille being uncontested. So, yes, the DA has made strides to, put more people in and diversify the caucus, the various caucuses. But in the positions of power, we don't necessarily see that. And unfortunately for the DA, those positions of power is what the public and what voters see. They see a Jordan A. Lewis, they see a Alan Windy in the Western Cape, where you have a coloured leader of the DA, but you have a white premier.
So what I found interesting is that the DA is looking internally in terms of how it propels people up the ranks. It was criticized in the past that it sort of parachutes leaders and fronts black leaders, without real experience. There's about 80 constitutional amendments that they're busy discussing now as we speak. A lot of the first part of it is around managing, who gets up the ranks. A lot of it was rejected. There was an effort to basically determine that you cannot be a leader of the party if you didn't show some track record. Jason, what's the sentiment on the floor?
So the sentiment on the floor, it was first of all rejected. So if one looks closely at the comments on the resolution itself, it basically says that, and this was also an issue, a big issue in the Eastern Cape, where they said that we have members of the party who've been members of the party for 15 years, and they've never held the position of ward councillor or MPR or anything like that. So these are people that have worked in the party, they've got a track record, but they never ever get to a point where they can avail themselves for a position of a councillor or MPR or even an MP. So this is why it was resoundingly rejected by
because the DA has that what is it?
A selection panel basically.
Yes.
So it's not like in the ANC where there's a list and it's you work the delegates, you work the comrades. There's a selection panel.
So it's not a popularity.
No, definitely not. So you sit basically there like we're sitting here, and maybe you would be interviewing me and asking me what is my track record in the party, and this is why you would have councillors coming up the ranks who are well educated, councillors who speak very well, councillors who are a little bit they might be about popular with their communities. They might also have a track record of actually working for the party and working around certain leaders. But the ordinary man on the street, ordinary lady in the caucus will almost never get an opportunity to get to that level to say, listen, I've worked in the party, I know the community, can I be a councillor? And the answer is, in most cases, no for those kind of people. And this is why it's been rejected by almost all the provinces, and certainly here at the conference. I mean, they have red and green. Red means we rejected. Green means yes. I saw about 2 green little stickers. So yeah, it's basically just saying that judge us on what we've done in the party, not necessarily judge us on what we bring, because there are certain people that bring a lot to the party and a lot to the DA, but they've never had any position within the party.
Junior, the DA has been criticized in the past for policy uncertainty. We didn't know whether they were coming or going. They would, that has been a big issue, in that 2016, 17, 18, 19 period where things were been a bit awry for the party. They've now come up with like firm resolutions in terms of what they want to, where they stand on particular matters. I found certain things interesting, right? For example, the first resolution is the DA condemns the illegal invasion and occupation of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Interesting, considering we know what the ANC's position is. They deal with foreign policy. One proposal that if the DA is in power, South Africa must break away from BRICS. I found that interesting. But interesting ones around the independence of the Reserve Bank, government pensions, some stuff about animal welfare. So, interesting. Some redundant in some ways. Establishment of South African Coast Guard. Okay, cool. But I think this is important because this Congress gives me the first real sense of this is what the DA is about. That is For example, they say the DA is requesting a judicial commission of inquiry into farm murders, meaning the DA is putting this issue, which is a very controversial issue of whether it's actually farm murders or just murders, at the heart of who it is, and at the heart of its message to voters. So what do you make about some of these resolutions that are being proposed here and most likely to be voted tomorrow?
I think the DA finally coming with these resolutions is what has made John so popular right now, because even when Soli was speaking to News24 earlier, he pointed to that fact that the DA did have policies, but they were very vague, they were not certain, and with John coming in and some of the leaders coming in, they have made sure that there is some policy certainty. Yes, most of them are populist and most of them go against what the ANC is saying, but at least we finally know what the DA stands for. So it bodes well for the party going into the 2024 elections, because in the previous elections, people knew that they were not voting for the ANC and just voting for anyone else. But now they would know we are voting for the DA because this is what it's going to provide for us. So I think it works well for him, John Steenhuisen, and the party as well going into the national elections.
Just get us through what the rest of the weekend looks like at this Congress.
So they continue with the constitutional amendments, which will we'll probably end at around 6 tonight. And then tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow voting
But obviously
happens.
we're going to hear from John and Mpho Phalatse.
We'll hear from them as well.
In the next hour or so.
In the next hour or so, we will hear from them. They will make their speeches. I think it's one last call for support for both leaders. Tomorrow the elections, the actual voting takes place, we will then obviously votes will then be tallied. We will then know by tomorrow who will lead the party for the next 3 years. And then, it will be constitutional amendments will continue. Obviously, there's about 80 of them. We can't get through all of them in one day, I would assume. But today is more about the internal
tomorrow by the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, as DA party leader. Is going to be an interesting speech.
It's almost seen as a farewell speech, and it's his last report of how he led the party. But then all indications are that he will be re-elected, and soon after that he will then address the Congress again. And in that address, we will then know, like Junior said, what the DA actually brings to the party. Tangible things as to how are we going to govern South Africa.
Oh, sorry about that. When I was speaking to him downstairs, John said, wait until tomorrow and you will hear like how firm I'm going to be when I speak about some of the things that I would want the party to do going into next year's elections. So I'm sure that speech is going to focus mainly on the 2024 elections, what the DA is going to offer, how the DA is going to run its campaign. So it's going to be very interesting if it does win the election tomorrow morning.
But obviously his competitor, Mpho Phalatse, has been very muted. Even today, she's been very quiet. I haven't seen any banners with her name or her face on it. So I mean, things look like it's going a certain way. I'm interested to get very specific details around whether the DA would rule out working with the ANC like it did in the 2021 municipal elections, and it didn't do very well for them. To enter an election by saying we're not going to negotiate with X party or X party, whether it's the EFF or whether it's the ANC, or maybe their polling says they should do that, and that would attract more supporters. The other thing I'm interested in, folks, is around what John Steenhuisen had said in an internal debate last week, where he said that polling puts them just 10% below the ANC at the moment. So I want to get a sense of, realistically, or okay, let's take the term realistically out, right? But what is the DA projecting its support today? Should we go to a poll today? And then the third thing is, I think what's important for me is who becomes those deputies, in those positions that are contended, because that is the second layer of leadership, which I think, whereas the first layer is predictable, we know who they're going to be. It's the second layer where there's some change can emerge, and so that will be interesting for me. But again, thank you so much, guys, for joining the discussion. You can follow Jason Felix and Junior Khumalo's reporting from this conference, as well as our colleague Jan Gerber's reporting on this conference on News24. We have a live update there. We will come to you live tomorrow. You can stream this congress on news24.com. We will keep you informed of all things DA Congress. Thank you for listening, and see you tomorrow.